Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today to stay curious. I got Gary Allgire beside me. Hey, Gary.
Good to see you again.
Well, good to see you again. Gary, of course, is a structural engineer on Apollo and the Space Shuttle, just like our intern has set that up there. Thank you very much, Logan. We have Logan running the board here. Marty's in the building, and Logan is a student at Eastern Florida State University, Logan Cope. So thank you, Logan, for learning a little about this, and you're doing a good job. So, and this guy here, we're going to keep him in the hot seat as long as you're in town.
Yeah.
After all, he worked on Apollo and shuttle and worked on, as you say, everything. And how do you characterize your
I
job?
worked on anything that didn't have electrons running through it or fluids.
That's a good way to put it. And
Yes.
he's done a hell of a great job making this complex space world simple to us all. And we're going to talk about Apollo 10 today, on its way to the moon 55 years ago
Yeah.
this moment.
Hard to believe.
It was going into orbit on May 21st, launched on May 18th. And of course, I call it, and headlines were barnstorming the moon. And then I had someone ask, what does barnstorming mean? So actually, what were they doing, Gary, Apollo 10?
Well, they were just going to go down to what 10 miles off the moon's surface and then come right on back up. They weren't going to land.
But they had specific objectives they wanted to accomplish there. And part of that was, of course, the second flight of a lunar module in space, the only spacecraft built to operate in space, land on another world, and blast off another world. And then no one's done that in 55 years.
Yes, that's true. Oh, yes.
Up there, because every spacecraft that's built for humans since and before had a heat shield on it to bring them home safely.
Yes.
And this certainly didn't have that. They wanted to get the data for a landing rehearsal for Apollo 11 that was probably going to give the green light if this was going to be a good mission. And Gary, just kind of give us an overview of it. You were there. You said you weren't specifically working on Apollo 10, but you'd worked on Apollo 8. You were starting to work on 12.
Well, I worked Apollo 9, which was the first time we launched the Saturn V with the lunar module. And it was just an orbital mission where they practiced docking with the lunar module, then undocking, and then they flew away, I think, about 200 miles, and then re-rendezvoused back with the command module. Did a lot of things as firing the descent engine and the ascent engine. And then so after 9, I was going to be signed to 11, but I moved on to, I think, 13 or 14 is what I actually worked. But I did maybe cover a couple of shifts on 10, but and there's something that we want to talk about 10 that relates to Apollo 13.
Absolutely. We've got, Gary's got a great little side view here of what happened on 10 contributed to what happened on 13.
Yes.
I've got my smart tablet out here. We got Steve Jokums is watching from the Lake County Spaceport up there on the shores of Lake Michigan. He said greetings to Mark, Marty, Gary, and the entire Stay Curious gang. And kudos to you there, Steve. Got Carlton Bailey's watching. He loves hearing the history of the past programs. Suta Laika just chimed in there. And like Steve says there, not just the history, but people like Gary that made it happen. And that's why every time I'm doing a program that I can bring somebody in that was there or has some expertise in it, I'm going to do it. And I told Gary, I texted him last night and said, help me with Apollo 10. We're going to be talking about that today. So got some interesting, it's a very interesting mission as far as pop culture. Okay. There is a twist that entails Apollo 13 in this. There was some drama of the first cuss words uttered over an open mic, but some serious drama that wasn't supposed to happen. And there was even a question, would Tom Stafford and Gene Cernan in the lunar module actually fake something's wrong and land on the moon?
Yes.
so that they would have to blast off. But they did something so they knew that they would never
Yes.
want to try that, right?
That's true. And the rumors, there was a lot of discussion in the halls and in the offices about them. It's awful tempting to land, and maybe they're going to pull the trigger and would land on there. But then we were told that they couldn't, because if they did, they would never return.
Marty, is that right? They didn't have enough fuel. You've heard those rumors. Tell us a little bit about that on the UCAC family microphone.
I mean, if Gary says it's true, then I guess it's true. But I've never. This mic's not on.
Your,
Come over here.
your mic's not on?
No.
No.
I heard rumors before, and if Gary says it's true, Gary would know. I don't know for sure.
Uh-huh.
I'll defer to Gary's expertise because he was I was contractor.
You didn't have nothing to do with the fuel. You were electrical
yeah.
guy.
Yeah, but also I'd be surprised. Again, I'm not arguing with Gary. Don't get me wrong, but I can't believe that NASA would take the gamble, where if they had a land, they would not give them sufficient fuel to lift off the moon. So to me, that makes it hard to believe that they would not fully load the vehicle.
Good point, because something could happen that they accidentally had to do an abort to the surface.
Well, I think in the report, yes, that they didn't put enough fuel in the acid engine, I think is what it was.
Well, that's the rumor,
Yeah.
and I'll assume it's true. But me personally, I find it hard to believe that NASA would do that.
I don't know. I just know that was the topic of discussion. That was either it was going to be way too much. This wasn't a lightweight limb, according to what I originally heard, and then I've also heard that they just didn't put enough fuel in it to keep them from being tempted to land on the moon and spoil the whole thing.
Yeah, but then what if you needed more fuel to dock with the command module? That's what makes me hard to believe that they would do
true.
that. And again, I'm not saying they did not do that.
Yeah.
Me personally, I find it hard to believe.
Well, and that's why we loved you watch and stay curious
Yes.
here. Two people who were there 55 years ago. Marty Winkle, who worked as a lead electrical engineer on the Grumman-built Apollo module, which is not only the last of such spacecraft to fly in the environment of space and built for that and never built to return, but it was also handmade. I mean, people on milling machines, and there's no 3D printing back in 1969.
None for that stuff.
And so basically, you'll never see another spacecraft designed to travel to another world that was built by hand. Chief engineer was Tom Kelly. We'll talk about that in a minute here. But that's so we're glad that you're watching today and enjoying this great conversation between our space worker friends that I'm privileged to be part of. You want to donate to our museum? This is how you can do it. That's the page that up at the upper right-hand corner, the yellow little bar there takes you to donate by PayPal. We will give you the address. You can mail us a check if you have such a thing still. And but donating to our nonprofit is essential for us to stay open, and many of you have, and we certainly appreciate that. Or right now on YouTube, there is astronaut Winston Scott saying, give us a little bit of money to this nice place here. Winston, of course, a great friend of our museum. He lives on the Space Coast and is over the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex astronaut program. But you can this does not show up during our broadcast, but you go and look at the rebroadcast or any of the other 500 or so YouTube Stay Curious programs we have. You have a thanks button, and you can go up to $500. Those are increments of 20, 50, 100, 150. So thank you all for what you can do to support our nonprofit. And thank you, Winston, for always being there when we need an astronaut to talk to some Cub Scouts or something like that. He's a great guy. You ever met Winston?
No, I have not.
Hell, you missed out. He's truly a wonderful man, and does a lot for our community here. He was at UCF, University of Florida, UCF, Central Florida. No, he was at FIT, I'm talking about, Florida Institute of Technology, where the building is named after one of the managers of the lunar module, You're helping me out with his name real quick.
George Scarlett.
George Skurla, yes, George Skurla. Big name in the Grumman world for the lunar module. George Skurla was over the 1,500 Grumman workers that were here at Kennedy Space Center. There's your pretty picture I took of you the other day. I'll send that to you.
Okay.
Barnstorms, the moon. Well, you might not know what barnstorming means.
Well, barnstorm came out in the 20s when back in the days when we had biplanes and they would go barnstorming around the country, showing off their airplanes. And
Yeah.
We'd crash in sometimes into the barns to prove something. I don't know. I've seen pictures of them intentionally crashing into a barn.
Wow. Yeah, you would have wing walkers
Yeah.
and people like that
Yeah.
that would be at the great aerial shows. And barnstorming was literally coming down close to something and then flying away from it. So that's what the headlines of Life magazine was, that Apollo 10 barnstorms the
Yeah.
moon. And gee, it's heck to get old, you know. In the Roaring 20s was 100 years ago. We're
Yeah.
living in the Roaring 20s. Yes, Marty.
Mark, I think barnstorming came in back in the days when they were doing acrobatics like you were just talking about, but they would land in farm country. And I think that's how they got the name barnstorming.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We got Gary Gerald's here. He's got a treat for you when we leave. I'll have to have
Okay.
Marty toss us a few. He brought some great onions to us here. Yeah, hand me one of them. Robert Law's watching Dundee, Scotland, and he says Apollo 10. There you go.
Yeah.
Look at that beautiful big fat Vidalia onion. Thank you, Gary Gerald. There, we're all going home with a bag of
Okay.
those there.
Tell
so.
him hi. My son's in Scotland today.
Oh, your son's in
Yeah,
Scotland?
they're riding. Him and his wife are riding their bicycles across Scotland.
What town? Do you know what?
He checked in today.
Robert's up in Dundee, which I think
I
is
think
northern
he's-
Scotland.
Yeah, he just crossed over into Scotland from England. They started at the very tip down at Land's End, and they're riding their bicycle all the way up to the whole island, all the way to the very tip.
Wow. Well, Robert says Apollo 10 was the first launch live on the 405 line black and white TV that he had in Scotland. I have followed every space mission since. Got to meet all three astronauts, so that's pretty cool. We'll talk about those three astronauts here in a minute. Hello again, says Dave Stange up in Michigan. So good everybody's chiming in today. And Steve Jokums makes the point, Marty, that maybe the short fill was not fuel, but consumables. They weren't supposed to be in the LEM that long. And they weren't. They were in there for 4 orbits around the moon, which is about a 2-hour orbit. So they were actually 8 hours separated from the command module. So let's get into all this wonderful history of the Apollo 10. There's the iconic shield showing the, I love that, the command module going through the X for Roman numeral 10 there. And the lunar module on flames that you'd never see in space, landing there. There's the 3 astronauts, the launch on the left. We'll talk about those astronauts here. There's Gene Cernan on the left, his second flight to space. Tom Stafford, the general, was the commander in the middle. His second trip to space. Actually, no, third. Yeah, they were all I'm sorry, they were all 3. This is their third trip to space. And John Young, his second trip to space up there. All are deceased now, and kind of puts you in your place, doesn't it? There,
Mhm,
you
yes,
were
it
working
does.
on this, and there's the recovery. Just remind everybody they recovered these spacecraft at sea. There's the launch that Chris Calley on his montages, world-renowned artist, friend of our museum, does these beautiful montages.
Beautiful.
He's a University of Michigan graduate, so I think he's obsessed with the blue. Okay. He's got blue and gold in this picture here. I see it, Chris, there. But of course, there's Kennedy pointing out his visit to Kennedy Space Center with Wernher von Braun. All kinds of things going on in this beautiful one-of-a-kind artwork by Chris Calley. There was the famous chart. Now you can actually buy this as a piece of artwork and put over your couch, as NASA art is considered legitimate artwork. Gary, quickly, what are we looking at here?
Well, that's the profile. It looks like of once you launch from the Earth, and it takes you to the moon and around the moon, and then brings you back. It shows the different sequences during the trip to the moon and coming back when they do their translunar injection, and when also they do later on when they do a different trajectory where they get off their free return and land at different areas on the moon.
Something like 125 things have to go
Yeah.
right, and if one of them doesn't, it's an abort.
That's right.
Just an amazing chain of link of things that have to go right to get there and then to get back. Of course, the moon's orbiting the Earth. It moves considerably. It's moving 2,000 miles an hour, and it moves its own diameter every hour. If you watch the full moon coming up this weekend. But it moves quite a bit, and that's part of the rocket science of this. One of the cool photos taken during the era, showing you wow, look at the intricacies of all that rocket exhaust and the diamond patterns, and I mean that is a rocket physicist's dream there to analyze all that stuff.
That was 7 million pounds of thrust that they used to get that thing off the ground.
Yes, and that's way downrange there, close probably to first stage cutoff. Here is the lunar module that was first envisioned by Grumman in 1962 in a fantasy landscape type of look there. And we actually have that as a model here in our museum. It's one of the cool things I love here. Who knows what it's worth? Ours is in somewhat disrepair, but I say we still think it's worth $10,000-$20,000. We would never sell it, but had 5 legs, 2 docking ports, 4 windows. It ended up with 2 windows, a docking port, an exit hatch, and 4 legs on it there. And there's President Kennedy with some of the VIPs. That's Mr. Webb right there behind him. Gil Ruth is this other balding gentleman. Another concept of the lunar module when Kennedy spoke I think that was here at the Space Center.
I don't know.
Well, it could be Houston.
That's before my time here.
But look at how they were envisioning it then. They didn't have windows looking down. That wouldn't work out. Big antenna dish there. So it's a very complicated machine that was made to be as light as it could. They perfected the use of manufacturing techniques. I took the skin off here in this 3D, and that's not a very good image. I need to change that one. But look at what it looks like with the skin off of it. It pioneered techniques such as chemical milling. Marty, you want to tell us what that is? Chemical milling?
Well, I'm not a mechanical engineer like Gary. I do know we had a mill down, trying to get the weight down on the lunar module, and was milled down to, I think it was 0.015 mils, just to reduce the weight. And that was a substantial amount of weight, that reduction that we had. But how they did it chemically, I have no idea.
Well, they don't, instead of machining it, they use chemicals to cut away the material.
So they put it in a bath, and the material molecules come off of it.
Yeah.
Tom Kelly, the architect and father of this wonderful spacecraft, has wrote a book about it called Moonlander. Another definitive book is the one that I turned you on to, Marty. What's the name of that book? It's the Grumman history of the thing. Probably it'll come to my mind.
Chariots of Apollo?
Yeah, Chariots of Apollo. Yeah, thank you, Marty. Chariots of Apollo is another great book to read. It was built with an aluminum alloy thickness now that they put over this. Just go get some aluminum foil in your kitchen cabinet there. 3 sheets of aluminum foil. And we're not talking the heavyweight stuff, okay? That was the thickness of it. The cabin, propellant tanks, reaction control system, environmental control system suffered no mission-threatening leaks on any of the LEM's 2 orbital flight tests and 6 moon landings, all right? Never had a leak in this entire system of the hypergolic fuels, the air system. I think that's really a tribute to the great workmanship of this.
Yes.
There it is. being put in an altitude chamber test in there. Doesn't look like anything. There's the inside of it. It's missing right in the center there, the computer. We'll see some pictures of that computer. Marty, one thing that I always love hearing astronauts talk about, I've heard Charlie Duke mention this. First time he got in it and it pressurized out, he said he thought the windows were going to pop out.
Oh,
They
really?
moved so much. He said the windows had a bow to them because of the pressure inside. Marty, you were inside it, but never pressurized, I gather.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah, only the astronauts were in there at
Yeah.
that time.
yeah. So it was as everything was as thin as it could be. Um, so in there we think there's two engineers there, and that's Marty's foot outside the lunar module hatch there. That's got to be you, Marty.
It could be, I doubt it, but the guy on the left is actually a pad leader.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Because and then so he's just watching you guys work there. Let's see. We've got. We'll welcome your comments or questions to Marty or Gary here. The triangular windows did cut the weight of the LEM. Marty's told me before, and he's talked on this show, they actually had a contest to eliminate how many pounds? But you all we're going to get a bonus for eliminating so much weight, I think. Did Mark say bonus? Marty said, I never heard of that.
It's a bonus that did not go to the employees.
Went to the
Oh,
It's a contractor
yeah,
bonus.
they got a they got a bonus.
and that's so it's up for them to share it with you or not. All right, well, let's get more into this beautiful machine. There's the Grumman workers that we're bragging about. A perfect machine, perfect 100% flight record. And not only that, Gary, but it saved the lives of the Apollo 13 astronauts and was never
Yeah.
intended to do that or be used to
As a last
this engine to be used to escape lunar orbit.
they had practiced that particular aspect of it on Apollo 9. And that's what gave them the confidence when they had
To use the descent engine as a.
as to bring them back out to around the moon
All right.
and back into a free return trajectory, because they were not on one. If they had not fired that engine, they would have never come back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Impossible to.
There's a lot of things we did on 8 and 9 that were actually used for Apollo 13.
Well, it's good to know that they had the foresight to think that through. Of course, there is the command module, and we're going to talk. I'm using this for Gary to tell you something, how this,
This-
mission relates to Apollo 13's mission.
This picture here, unfortunately, is Apollo 15.
Okay.
But
It is a sim bay.
it is
Everybody has busted me on that. I did. I just wanted a command module
Yeah.
picture to kind of set this up.
But it's pretty much the same as what they had on Apollo 10. The only difference is what we're going to talk about next is right here. This is Bay 4.
Now this is in the cylinder part
This
there.
is in silver. It's 180 degrees opposite of what you're seeing right there.
All right, that's the
Sim bay.
scientific instrument bay that Apollo 15, 16, and 17 had.
Yeah.
Astronaut had to get out of the spaceship and retrieve the film out of that.
Now the white stuff that you're seeing there, those are radiators. The large radiators towards the end of where the nozzle is, that's radiators to cool all the tanks and instrumentation that's inside the service module.
Okay,
And then the smaller ones that go around the periphery of the
right there.
service module, those are dedicated to all the electronics that are inside the command module.
Never knew that's what those
Yeah.
white stripes were, the
And-
actual radiators.
Well, that's what the stripes are really just raised up pipes. That's what they did. And that was a special white paint that we had to keep track of. And I think on 3 missions, we had to actually go back and repaint those. And we had a really crude at the time instrument that would go up against it, and we would measure the reflectivity and emissivity of that paint. And if it didn't match what was the test samples, then we would have to repaint it.
All right, well, we're going to go inside that service module, the SM. Let's make that big there.
Okay. Okay, there's 3 shelves in here. The upper one is the fuel cells. There's 3 fuel cells in there. The blue tanks are your oxygen tanks, and then we have doubled up as the hydrogen tanks is the pinkish. And in the center, as this is show up, we had helium tanks in there for pressurization of the tanks.
Okay.
Now for Apollo 10, this is SM 106. We got a call from Houston, JSC, that we would need to ship the oxygen tanks in its shelf back to Downey, California for an upgraded modification to it. So we had to remove that. And what we have here is three different, the same model. It shows you how we can either lift the fuel cells out, or the oxygen tank shelf, or the hydrogen tank
That's
shelf.
a tool you built to just take
It's
these
a
tanks
piece of
out.
GSD. It's suspended by a hoist, usually an overhead crane. It has these big wheels on the back side of it that are counterweights that it's threaded on that shaft, and you turn it have a chain that pulls this thing, and you could counterbalance the weight so you could pull the shelf out. Now to remove the shelf, it's a triangle pie-shaped shelf, and you cannot take the tanks out by themselves. There's just not enough room, so you have to pull the whole shelf out. And there's, I think, I don't know the exact number, but down each side of the shelf, there's about 18 rivets. And then at the very end of the shelf, at the pointy end, there's just one bolt. And what happened was, in removal, is we removed the rivets, and then they tried to pull the shelf out. And unfortunately, they forgot about the bolt, and it caused to overstress the hoist. I think we can go to the next picture.
I think I have that. Oh no, okay.
I don't have that picture
right.
in here? Okay. Anyway, we overstressed that hoist, and it broke.
Yeah, there was another picture of
In
the.
there. Yeah, it didn't show up.
Okay, all right.
But anyway, what it caused the shelf to fall forward down, and when it did, tank number 2, which is the closest one on the left there, it came up and it hit the top end of the shelf. And there's this tank 2. I've got it numbered right there.
Okay, far left there.
And
number 2.
unfortunately, it was damaged, and we did not know it. That was removed, sent to California. The whole the shelf was updated. The tank, everything was tested again, and that was put into Apollo 13's shelf, 109.
Wow.
So that's what caused the issue of what
And here
happened.
is. Oh, that
There's a
got too big. Oh, here, if I go smaller on here, you see
that
the white circle at
Yeah.
the top.
That's where the tank, and that's where the fill port is. And what they suspected later after 13 is that this fill port, as it goes into the tank, it goes into a nozzle, and it got bent out of shape. And so they could fill the tank, but they couldn't drain the tank.
Hmm.
And that's part of the 13. If we ever talk about 13, we'll
Yeah, I
get
thought
more
we had some
detail.
other slides there that we didn't
Yeah.
pull off that showed the that you actually had a fire start in there, didn't it?
There was a fire. There's a lot more to this, and I think it's more appropriate we talking about 13. But
Yeah.
but they did have a fire. Now this is they're back on the ground after 13. They took on one of these tanks and a module, and they pressurized it. They did reproduce the fire, and what it did is it blew out there's a safety port up there that blew it out. And what happened was during 13, when Jack Swigert flipped the switch, it didn't go boom right then. It took a minute and a half before they finally got the boom. And what is happening is that gas, that high pressure oxygen is coming out, and it finally fills up the whole compartment, and it blows the outer panel off. And doing that, it damaged tank number 1. And that's where they started losing all the oxygen for the fuel cells.
Well, we'll have you back in April next year and talk more about
Yeah.
Apollo 13
Yes.
in there. But
Yeah.
yes, you found some good stuff that we hadn't seen before there,
Now,
Gary.
it's being engineers with NASA and with the contractors, we have a lot of frustration. Now, when we got the new shelf to put in for Apollo 10, they sent us a kit. The kit is, they got the shelf, and then the rivets come in a package. Now, I think I want to clarify something. we cannot put part numbers on washers, nuts, bolts, and screws. They're just too small. So they come in a package. And when we go to do the work, we have the engineers, we generate the paperwork calling out what the part number is going to be. And when they get that package, there will be a package with all the fasteners in there. And on that package will be the part number. And it better match what was in the procedure, which is what should match, which is on the drawings. If they don't match at that time, and it does happen, is because something has changed and they have not updated the drawings yet. So we have to do a lot of research. They write a problem report because they don't match, and we can't close that paper out until down in California, North American Aviation at the time has to write an engineering order to that drawing, and once that's released and brought here, once we see that drawing, we can verify, yes, it is now per print.
Huh.
So, but anyway, the 18...
Keeping track of all that, by the way, is a configuration management
That's right.
person.
That's what they do.
That,
So
it's so OCD, you can't believe it. No,
That's
we
right.
love our CMs.
Yeah,
They're
but
very
for the-
detail-oriented people.
But for the 18 rivets that we had to install, which were very difficult in a very tight position, when they sent us, when we opened up that package, there's 18 rivets in there. So we go in and put them in. Out of the 18, 6 failed. So what happens is then we call JSC, who calls Rockwell and says, hey, we need some rivets. And we told them, don't give us 6, give us 10 or something so we can have some extras. What they do is they get a call back to Houston, they get a T-38 with an astronaut. He flies to California, picks up the package, flies to Kennedy Space Center, drops them off, and he flies back to Houston. We get the package, and we open it up, and there's just 4.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so we go to pull them. Out of the 4, 2 fail. So again, they repeat the whole sequence all over again. He flies all the way out to Houston.
T-38 jet fuel making
out there, flies back. We open up the package, just 2. Luckily, there's 2 made it. Otherwise, I just can't imagine.
Why do they do that?
Well, they're
Yeah.
tracked. We could, because they have tracked them from the mine that the metal came out of.
Really?
They go through a complete certification, and they do a lot of them. And and they sample those lots, and if they fail, then that lot is discarded. And so there's a very, very expensive control system to make sure that all the fasteners are all up to spec for what they were designed for. So that's one of the reasons. But why they were so tight-lipped about not giving us a couple extra, we could always send them back.
Did you hear that? They tracked the mine
Yeah.
that the metal comes out of
Yes.
for these rivets.
It's traced all the way till it's used.
Wow. Do we do that today? Do you think Boeing's doing that with Starliner?
I
or
don't think so. I don't know what they do today. I know they work.
They buy it at Walmart's what they do.
I got introduced to a company called Skybolt that makes fasteners for SpaceX, and they're certified. They go through a lot of testing, and it says this package, we can certify that they meet the specs that they were designed, manufactured to.
Well, I know you're enjoying Gary Allgire's conversation with you today, and I'm filling in the blanks here about the history that you all know out there to repeat a little bit.
But
well, Gary, and we got Marty Winkle in here that worked this Apollo 10 mission going on 55 years ago this week.
But yes, but it's just amazing to me that Apollo 10 affected Apollo 13.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then he showed you there where the change in how that oxygen tanks were put in there. As careful as they were, they still messed it up. Let's talk about this mission here. We're going to go, this is, of course, another chart to show you how the moon's moving around the Earth, and we launched from Earth, and but it was descent, ascent, and rendezvous. There was no landing on this, of course. It was going through the dress rehearsal, hovering above the surface as they photographed the landing spots for Apollo 11's next attempt. And there's a beautiful shot that Logan chose for screen a green screen there. That just doesn't get any better than that on a beautiful
Yeah.
Florida day, does it?
Yeah.
Once again, Gene Cernan on the left. Of course, the last man to walk on the moon on Apollo 17 is the commander with Harrison Schmitt. And then you got the general, Tom Stafford, who just passed away. Gino died about 5 years ago, probably about 3 years ago. Stafford died 3 or 4 months ago. And John Young's been gone for about 5 years on there. All great astronauts that have got big chapters about their careers in Gemini and Apollo. And of course, Stafford, the general, was the commander of the Apollo Soyuz test mission. And they always had fun.
Yes.
Okay, you got to break up the seriousness there. I wonder if anybody even knows what this means anymore.
I don't know.
Steve Jokums does, but it's you would see this a lot. 3 monkeys.
Yeah.
Hear no evil, see no evil. No, speak no evil. Hear no evil, see no evil. Let's get it right. Speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil is what John Young's doing there. And I know my grandparents had a couple of those on their
Everybody else
mantelpiece
very,
above.
very popular back
Yeah,
in the
it certainly was
in their
back then.
20s, 30s, and 40s.
Yeah. Speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil. And that's probably what astronauts really felt like with engineers like you telling them what to do all the time. Do you think?
Well, I don't know about that now.
A great crew, very cohesive crew. Of course, John Young then became a commander of Apollo 16, and Gene followed on Apollo 17. And you wonder why the general passed up a chance to walk on the moon. He was offered it, but I've never heard anything about that.
I've never heard anything either. Because we don't know, from an engineering standpoint, we don't discuss much anything with the astronauts unless they personally come up and ask you a question. We act very professional, and we just don't interfere with what they're doing. We're there to do the job, and we have our procedures, and when we need to talk to them, we will talk to them on the net, but we don't sit there and ask them about how they're doing or anything like that, or especially no autographs. We never ask for our autographs.
Got a couple comments here from you people watching. Thank you. Mark Thel asked regarding the Apollo 15 command service module photo. Was a discoloration of the umbilical caused by thruster firing?
Yes, that it was. Definitely.
Good eye. And Spaceaholic says, can Gary elaborate on the Ashur process and how that worked? ASHUR.
I don't know what Ashur is.
Okay, we're not sure what ASHUR is, all capital letters there, Spaceaholic. And
Can they expand on that and the comment?
Yeah, elaborate on what that acronym means there. And Mark Thale, again, when they staged the LEM, was it true that the ascent stage wild ride was caused by a switch being out of position? And that's true. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail here. It was out of position because one astronaut put it in position, and the other astronaut thought that that he was the one to put it in position, so he put it out of position. And that created a scenario. Who out there knows who were the backup astronauts for Apollo 10? If you know Apollo crew selection by Deke Slayton and Alan Shepard, if you were backup, you were going to be the prime 3 missions later. You'd skip 2 and be the prime on there. So who was the backup that should be Apollo 13 astronauts, if it worked out right? Spaceaholic says Apollo spacecraft hardware utilization report.
I'm not familiar with that. That's somebody that would be in the monitors of the what we just call here
Configuration management people.
Would be somebody that would were involved with that.
Well, there, Mark Thale, he
I'm
came
sorry.
up.
Yeah.
Well, Spaceholic says Asher process was used to document authorization for post-flight removal of items and from the flight vehicle.
Oh, no, we never got involved with any of that. So that hardware was shipped out as soon as it was retrieved. It's other than the shuttle.
Well, we'll send Mark Thale out there a big kudos. He guessed it right. Your backup crew was Gordon Cooper, all right, who flew Mercury 9, the last person to fly solo for America in space in 1960. Three. Yeah, 1963. And then in the middle there is Edgar Mitchell, a rookie, and Don Isley is on the right. Don Isley was on Apollo 7. All right. And so only one of these men made it to space, and that would be Edgar Mitchell in the center on Apollo 14.
Yeah. And he got to walk on the moon.
And he got to walk on the moon as a rookie. He also got to help our museum a lot. A great guy.
Yes.
Actually, Gordon Cooper was demoted. It was thought by Deke Slayton that he didn't have his heart into it. He didn't practice and do rehearsals as hard as the other astronauts. And Don Isley was involved with the little bit of being talking back to the flight, so to speak. Apollo 10, Apollo 7, Earth orbiting, 10-day, a perfect mission with Wally Schirra in control, Don Isley, and then Walt Cunningham. Schirra said he was retiring after that flight. Walt and Isley never flew again because of some stuff that went on there.
It was unfortunate for that gentleman right there because Wally Schirra was the instigator of that crew, and they became the mutiny crew because of what Wally Schirra did not want to do. And so, unfortunately, he was just tagged along on that.
Yeah, they wanted to take a day off, and they were so busy because as things were going well, the people kept sending them more work to do.
First he didn't want the cameras. Wally didn't want the cameras in there, and the video cameras for that mission because it's the first time we're flying the Apollo Block 2 spacecraft. They forced him to put the cameras in, but the real thing was he did not want to re-enter with these suits on. And so when the time came for them to re-enter, lo and behold, all three astronauts developed head colds.
Uh-huh.
Now, how often do you think that would happen on somebody that's gone through all this quarantine, never been exposed, and all of a sudden they have three head colds, and so that they allowed them to open up their visors so they could pinch their nose, but that was the cause of them being grounded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's unfortunate. Never flew again.
For a long time.
Heard a lot about him. A great guy. Hazel Banks. Hey, Hayes. She knew him in the astronaut office there. Hazel Banks was Hazel Seacack back then. Thanks for supporting us, Hazel, and watching Stay Curious today. Well, let's get to this mission here a little bit. We had the command module that you see in orbit there. The command module. You got two vehicles in space. If you just have one, you say, hey, Apollo 7, how you doing? All right, because that was the only vehicle in space. But he got two vehicles in space, so you need call signs. So this crew came up with the call signs. And the command module was going to be called Charlie Brown, after the Peanuts character. They got permission from Charles Schultz, the artist, to use this. And the lunar module shown there without its descent stage in a gorgeous photo taken by John Young, actually would have took this photo of the Cernan and Stafford coming back from 9 miles within the moon. They had to have a name for that, and they called it Snoopy. So Snoopy and Charlie Brown become pop culture creatures of the space age, and Snoopy become the mascot of safety.
That's right.
On there. And part of the pop culture and the myth is Jamie Flowers as secretary along with Hazel Banks, they were one other lady was another secretary to the astronauts. There's Stafford petting the Snoopy, big plush Snoopy doll there. I know that Snoopy doll was $25 because I bought something big like that in like 1972. And so it wasn't cheap back then. Okay, that'd be $250 today. About so there's other pictures of they're trying to wrestle it and all that stuff. So this is their way out to the van to take them out to the Saturn V rocket. Eyes on Snoopy become the mascot of safety. The legendary Snoopy Award. It's about the size of your little finger, very small piece of jewelry that was the 1% of NASA contractors and workers would be bestowed this as part of their attaboys, and flown to space. And you're recommended by an astronaut. We've got Norm Carlson's here in the museum, the launch test conductor that was so famous in the shuttle for his beans or go.
That's right.
With STS-1. So, and we get into another beautiful montage by Chris Calley, the crew, and the launch, and the iconic Earthrise. We have a few artifacts here at the American Space Museum. I talk a lot, Gary, to groups that there are arrowheads from our Native Americans all over every county of America, but there's only one county you can get a brick thrown out of a flame trench at a moon port with a rocket going to the moon, and that is Brevard County. And that's one of a couple 1,200 bricks that were thrown out. That was documented. This was Apollo 10, pad 39A, become 39A, of course. It was just pad 39 then. And these are valuable stuff. I found one from Apollo 11 that Bob Seek brought us, and we went for over $1,000 at an auction.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. Snoopy caps. Snoopy again. This was of course, a aviator cap that goes back as far as World War I, probably.
It goes back further than
Yeah,
that.
back further than that. But that had the your speakers headset for your ears in there, and your voice microphone was in that, what they called a Snoopy cap. And we have that one is a mock-up that was not flown in space. You want to know more about how to land on the moon? Don Isley there, not the Don Isley of the astronaut. They spell it differently. Sunburst and Luminary, an engineering memoir. This is basically from the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, computer technicians that did this. Mark Thiel says Isley was also on the outs. Oh, yeah, this is true too about him. He was in a messy divorce.
Oh, yes.
And that was really probably the reason. They would have cut him some slack for going by his commander's orders. But he was one of the first astronauts to get divorced, and he was caught having an affair. And that was not good PR at the time for moon people. Yeah, because that was not uncommon, probably, among the astronaut corps. There is the famous DSKY, Desky computer, that this book is all about. Sunburst was the program for the command module. Luminary was for the lander. But this computer hopped up 1969, state of the art, had 64 kilobytes of memory, 64K. All right. There ain't nothing that's even 64 megabytes or 1,000 kilobytes anymore.
That's right.
But the astronauts would push verb, put in their number of the program, and hit noun, or that was sort of the sequence of it. And the whole landing sequence was called 68, 69, I believe. And I've been told by these people that did this, including Bob Pearson, who passed away in his 80s and trained all the astronauts on this, he was confident the lunar module could land uncrewed
Really? Oh,
with the
okay.
program. Yes,
Mm.
it might have they let a little bit hard than they wanted, but they had such confidence in this program,
Mm.
and I'm going to show you the profile of that program. Yep, just to throw back some green bar paper, Marty. You had stacks of that around you up in the shuttle time, right?
Yep.
You were with the shuttle in '81, of course, was '79 or '78. Green bar. I wonder when was the last time you ordered a case of that. You didn't know it was going to be the last time. Okay. It's like the last time you burned a CD, you didn't know that was going to be the last time you'd ever do that. Because then someone handed you a thumb drive with a USB port. This is the profile that Apollo 10 followed down to, well, they didn't go 10,000 feet down. This is they didn't quite get that far down. They would have been at 45,000 feet. But this is the final phases of it where the computer really took over. And I was commenting to you, Gary, that they're really on the forward trajectory going across the landscape. I was kind of under the impression that they would go up and then more down. Straight down would be better, but no, they were roaring across that landscape of the moon.
That would have taken more fuel if it comes slow down and it comes down.
Oh, it would have
taken more fuel to do that.
Gotcha. There's a great representation of Apollo 11 going through the canyons of New York City skyscrapers.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, to give you an idea of how it's scooting along and landing in Central Park.
Okay.
I'll see if I can find that for you. There, of course, is Snoopy in orbit. I double checked to make sure that was right, Marty. Looking for make sure it doesn't have a landing gear on the landing pad that's over the chair. Yeah. Not the probe. Yeah, that's what I meant. Landing gear. The probe. Those poles hanging down are 5 foot, and they would light up a blue button, Grumman blue contact light. There again, another look at the controls where the astronaut, the commander on the left, had a hand control there. And then usually the pilot would be punching in the numbers there for what they were doing. So, and here's a look out the window that Snoopy had on it there, looking down at the rills of lava that were frozen 3 billion years ago on the moon there. But one thing, they're making a lot of pictures going down Tranquility, Sea of Tranquility. Another picture about the lowest they got down. That's about 9 miles above the moon. You see the reaction control thrusters there. But this is a look at the Apollo 11 landing site, somewhere in this area in here, I believe, when I've looked it up. But what I wanted to impress upon everybody that might be new to the Apollo program is everywhere you looked was craters. And when you went down closer, you would think you'd not see any more craters. Oh no, there's craters on top of craters. There's 6-inch craters. There's 1-foot craters. Such a cratered world because of no erosion, no atmosphere, no wind, no water, nothing except micrometeorites beating it up over millions and millions of years creates a regolith that is fluffy, like I like characterizing it like a dry snow where you can't pack it, you know, and that's sort of what the lunar surface soil is like, according to Jack Harrison Schmitt told me. It was a lot like to him. You couldn't pack it. It wouldn't clump together like soil on Earth. It was like a dry snow on there. But somewhere in there is the ellipse that they chose to put Eagle down on Apollo 11 just 2 months after this mission finished. Well, they had an anomaly. While practicing the descent maneuver, the crew accidentally entered duplicate commands into the computer, which put the guidance navigation system into an abort mode. Then when they triggered the ascent stage separation, and Marty's talked about this before, you've got a descent stage engine, and that becomes the platform that you launch off of. And we can see all 6 of those on the moon. In fact, the India orbiter has been bringing back pictures of the Apollo landing sites. But But when that pyrotechnic happens to separate the ascent stage where the astronauts are with the bottom stage where the landing gear and radar and stuff was, it's dozens of explosive bolts and a guillotine to cut the connecting wires and tubes has to happen. So when they disconnected there, the pyrotechnics set the lunar module in a chaotic spin that had the potential to disrupt the navigation system entirely and crash the ship. This emergency just happened to occur during a live broadcast to Earth, so viewers heard astronauts Cernan and Stafford uttering some expletives as they worked to steady the spacecraft. Stafford uttered the first one, saying "son of a bitch," and he had a bucking Bronco. The crew was seconds away from crashing into the moon when they successfully regained control. All right, and yet that may have played into the fact that they worked through an emergency, that gave confidence that would that happen to Apollo 11, they would know what to do.
Yeah.
All the other objectives were carried out perfectly, and the moon landing was to take place 2 months later. So there is some video of this that you can see. They're actually rotating around. They think that the LEM did like 3 complete rotations of this and oriented itself so it was pointing away from the moon and not towards it. And they safely rendezvoused and docked. Great dramatic moment in history. I think it's also in those documentary style Tom Hanks series that he did on the moon. There, it's shown pretty well. And there they claim is the last picture of the Snoopy as it is departed. You have an engineering side about that.
Yes. To separate the last time, I was always in the impression that we left the docking probe and the drogue with the docking ring attached to the lunar module. And here we can look at is the ring itself. That's the docking ring that has been cut loose from the command module. And in the center, you see that white dot. That is the hole that the capture, the head of the docking probe goes into, that locks on to the drogue so that they can retrack and dock with the command module. I have seen this picture and also for Apollo 13 where the docking probe is not there. So they evidently did bring them back, but I was told that they always stayed with the lunar module. And over to the left, just above, you'll see a little vertical small slot. Right, can you point to that?
Oh, that I was going to ask. It looks like a little window.
It is the window. That is the window that they were supposed to look out to, and to dock with the command module. But it was so small, and then there's a very small target that's in the command module window, and they really couldn't use it. Even though now the radar antenna is
up here.
Coming back down is the window. Right, right there. Stop. That's the window that the commander would look out.
So the triangle's above that.
The docking target is down below, right down there. That's where the docking target is. Okay, and that matches up to.
I'll go like that. You can see the docking target better there.
Better there.
Happy birthday!
Yeah. So.
Marty, what do you see in that picture that's familiar to you? What's that little hook up at everything? That's a good. Everything's familiar to you there. Well, let's get it up there and have Marty make a comment about it there. What's that little ring up there at the top, Marty? In the black rectangle.
Circular.
It's probably a bed. That offhand, I don't really know what that is. You're talking about. Let me get the arrow back.
And you're looking at 3 layers of aluminum foil, folks.
You talking about this right?
No,
yeah,
right
yeah.
There. I'm not sure exactly what that is. The IMU, inertial measurement system, is underneath that aluminum. So it probably has something to do with the IMU, but I really don't know. That's mechanical, so there's no wires going to it. So that's Garrett's.
I didn't work on a lunar module, so I can't really tell you either.
You're not sure what that is.
Yeah. But
Yeah, good. I left some of my notes over there that I was going to bring, but we got some great comments from everybody. Mark Thale says that the docking probe was inside the LEM when it was jettisoned, and he thinks that's an alignment telescope that we were pointing to. There, Marty.
Oh, you know what?
What's that?
Yeah, I think it's the star tracker.
Okay,
There's a star tracker inside
Okay.
the lunar module in the ascent stage, and that's probably I'll say the glass looking out.
So he's saying they put the probe inside the lunar module.
yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Except for 14. Now 14, I do know that they did bring back the drogue and the probe.
And as we're
14.
thinking about them getting them back, of course, the launch was May 18th. They came back the splashdown 9 days later. And Mark Thel points out that Charlie Brown holds the absolute speed record for the fastest re-entry from space. Faster than all the others, apparently.
I thought Apollo 13 did.
You thought Apollo? They went the furthest, Apollo 13.
But I also thought they were the fastest re-entry.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
probably
there's-
wrong, but
But they were fast and over 30,000 miles an hour,
Okay.
if you can even imagine that. Thanks for chiming in there, Mark Thel, with all your great comments there. We're ending our program here with what happened to Snoopy? Where is Snoopy?
Well, they found it.
Yeah. Some of them they crashed into the surface, some they didn't.
Yeah. It actually, when they went to go release, I don't think they had taken into account the air's trapped in between the two hatches from the lunar module hatch and also the command module hatch, and that little extra put it into an orbit around the sun
Yeah.
and Earth, and they have located it.
They certainly have. The astronomers have found it.
Yeah.
There it is within the red dashes there. That's is found in 2018. And would you believe its closest pass of Earth is going to be in 4 years?
Yeah.
2028. It's actually going to be outside the orbit of the moon. And maybe one of these billionaires will go bring it.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Catch it.
But this picture was taken when it was trailing the Earth, and it's in a higher orbit than the Earth. And like I said, it's going to be closest at that one point, and then where it goes from there, I don't know. Eventually, it may land because they have also tracked one of the third stage, the S4B, is also, I think it's on this mission, that's also trailing, and it's supposed to come back and land on the Earth in 20,000 years.
Yeah, all these gravity
Yeah.
will make them crash into the Earth or the
Eventually.
moon or Venus maybe on there. So, yeah, is there any engineering reason to want to bring this back? Of course, it'd have to be in a shuttle type
It'd be very
day
delicate.
to bring it back to Earth, but to take it and study it at a space
They could
station.
study that, look at the materials and how it held up. But as far as historical value, would be very important
Right.
to have that on display, that this was Apollo 10.
And memorabilia sales.
Yes, oh,
We'll
yeah.
be selling
Yeah.
chunks of it off
Yeah.
there. Marty's Mylar will be on there. Yeah, that's an interesting part, and there's several stories about it that you can read about that on there. So we appreciate everybody watching today. Great comments today on today. A lot of great space history on there. Steve Jokums, a space holic. Doug Forrest, Carlton Bailey, Suta Lackey B, Tom Musiak, Tom Celentano, Gary Gerald, Robert Law, Dave Stange, Mark Thale, and Cliff Watson down under in Pomona, Australia, having brekkie this morning on Wednesday in Australia. So what a world we live in, that we can communicate with you all and help you all stay curious. Thank you, Logan, for a great job today. Marty's over your shoulder there. Suta says, bring back Snoopy. And it would be something that for your grandchildren to go up and see at the Space Museum orbiting Earth or something like that someday. But we got to get some concepts in there. We say we're going back to the moon. Does this look familiar to you, Gary?
Not really, but it's a concept that was pretty popular back then. We were going to do a vertical landing, and as you pointed out earlier, we have a Gemini spacecraft on top up there
Yeah.
with the 2 hatches.
Well, that's from the 1960s, but when and if, I guess we'll say when, SpaceX lands its Starship on the moon, they're still going to need a long rope to get out of there.
That's a very
Okay.
interesting.
They're going to need this guy's rope there
Yeah.
to get down to the bottom. As we've got there a representation, so I make that a little bit smaller. There you've got the lunar module right there beside the Starship with some astronauts and a rover there. That's what we landed, folks. Okay, just keep this in perspective. 27 feet tall, maybe 23. It's 27 or 23, Marty. I forget which. And this is over 150. All right.
Wow.
And you just want to say, how's that going to work?
There's a lot of things I said he couldn't do, wouldn't work, and he's done it. So
Yeah.
who would ever thought you could land a first stage on a little barge out in the middle of the ocean?
Yeah, well, a drone barge,
Yeah.
and he's done it 308 times
Yeah.
and counting. Well, not all of them have been on the barge. About
Yeah.
25 have been on land. So, and finally, Apollo 10 Earthrise photo. That, of course, Apollo 8 was the first humans to see this gorgeous view on there.
Mhm.
And then artists around the world grabbed a hold of that, and then no one does it better than our friend Chris Calley in his third tribute montage to the Apollo 10 program. They're just about to fulfill President
Yeah.
Kennedy's pledge that we land on the moon before the end of the decade. And Mr. President, we did it twice
That's right.
in 1969. Not once, but we doubled down with the November Apollo 12 landing that I think was the exclamation point that drove the Russians to stay in Earth orbit, as
Yeah.
long as they did. So, well, Gary, thank you a lot for
Okay.
chiming in there. I think we've covered most of the
And one thing
pop culture stuff. And
I did want to mention is that Apollo 10 was the only one we ever launched from Pad 39B.
oh, it was launched 39B.
Yeah, it wasn't. That was the only one as in the Apollo program.
Well, I spoke wrong there. I didn't. I said it was 39A. That
That was 39.
B wasn't completed, but of course it was.
It
then,
was
so.
done. That was the only one.
And what was any back thinking about that? What was?
They just said, hey, we got this thing out there. It's been sitting there. We need to use it. And so they used it at one time. Now they did use it 4 more times, 3 for the Skylab missions and 1 and also for the ASTP, as they used it for that. But that was the only time they launched any rockets off of that pad.
So no moon landing launches were off 39B.
No.
So Artemis can't claim that as they
No.
took off over that pad there
Yeah.
and literally destroyed it. What there was.
Yeah, we used it in the shuttle more often than we did, obviously, than we did in the Apollo program.
Well, we thank everybody for watching. Mark Thale says, great show, guys. Thank you for your input, Mark. And Steve Jokum says, thanks, Logan. And he did do a good job today.
Yes.
And we hope he sticks around a little bit. He's, are you a senior, Logan?
Yes, I'm supposed to be graduating here in a few months.
Okay. All right. Well, we might lose him, but then again, maybe he'll get hooked on our museum, want to help us more. But we're grateful for East Florida State University and their program to want to share an intern with us or two every once in a while. New for Marty and I, and certainly might take this up to another level. So tomorrow's Wednesday. We're going to talk about some shuttles of the month of the month. We're going to look into getting a few guests for the rest of the week here, and this is Memorial Day weekend, and we're looking at a launch Saturday of the Starliner.
Hopefully.
Is it still on the books? As we sat down, it was, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get one. There's been kind of a snake bit thing there with all the problems.
Yeah, we need to get Sonny and Butch up to the space station, and so maybe we'll cook up some good luck Vidalias for them that Gary Gerald sent us there. Look at that green and that those are some of the fattest vidalias and delicious.
They
Already
are
ate
good.
some of them. So thank you, Gary Gerald. Thank you all for staying curious with us today. And thanks to this guy
Okay.
for always doing a great job and telling us just like it is, just like Marty Winkle here, talking about 55 years ago when they were involved with the Apollo 10 mission that set it all up for man's greatest adventure to land on the moon. Until next time, I'm Marquette saying I can't wait to see you in this museum to bridge the space between us.
Yeah, good.
I'm not going to